Yeah, to walk away when you're still in love has to be one of the hardest things to do. And in a movie that is so much about choice, this is the choice that they don't have.
Where are the quiet gays? Where are the quiet gays supposed to go?
Welcome back, everyone, to Lesbian Book Club. I'm here with Haylie.
Hi.
And we're going to be doing a couple announcements first. First big announcement that we have is that Haylie is going to be joining as our permanent co-host. So, yay! We'll still have some guest co-hosts now and then, but we'll probably have Haylie on to join as well. So you'll get 3 voices, maybe 4 sometimes, just to see how that goes. And also, in breaking news of our little podcast, we are going to be doing cinema editions and even maybe some silver screen editions of the podcast. I don't know about your guys' book clubs. Whenever I've been to book clubs, we always talk about different types of media, including books and TV here and there. So we also wanted to put out some more consistent content for you guys, and I'm a slow reader. So we're still gonna be trying to do 1 book a month, but intersperse that with some movies, a little bit of like some lesbian and queer education for our very young co-host over here. Because Haylie was born in 1999.
Mm-hmm.
So she hasn't even...
Still 90s baby.
That's like Taylor Swift being like all in on her 1989.
Yeah.
I was born in the 80s thing. So we're going to be doing some extra little education here and there. Haylie hasn't even seen the L Word. So we might do a rewatch for me, but a first time watch with Haylie. We'll see how that goes and if you guys enjoy that. Okay. So Haylie, how are you? How does it feel to be a podcast co-host?
I'm good. It feels like I'm going to be chatting, and I'm excited to be here with you.
I'm super excited. Do you want to tell everyone what we're covering today?
We are going to be talking about Portrait of a Lady on Fire.
Ooh, and you haven't seen it before, like yesterday, right?
No, I watched it for the first time yesterday. I was blown away.
I'm so interested to hear like all your thoughts. So I'm going to read the IMDb description, and it's literally like 15 words. It says, on an isolated island in Brittany at the end of the 18th century, a female painter is obliged to paint a wedding portrait of a young woman. That's all we get. A little bit of background on this. How good is your French pronunciation?
I'm going to offend the French.
Okay.
I went to France and was just constantly getting mean mugged over every time I tried to speak. So I apologize to the French.
Okay, well, mine's not going to be any better. We're going to do our best. But this was a 2019 romance film. It won Best Screenplay at Cannes, which for our American listeners, which is the majority of you, it's the Cannes Film Festival. I didn't know that it was pronounced Cannes like that.
Yeah, they don't have the S.
They just leave out a ton of consonants all the time. So this film, here's where we're going to get into our French pronunciation. This film stars Noémie Merlan and Adele, you have too many vowels in your last name, Hanel. And it was written by and directed by Celine Sciamma. That was kind of Spanish, but we'll go with it. I'm so sorry. If you want to...
We're going to get angry letters.
I know. Everyone's going to correct us and be like, God, don't cover a movie that you guys can't pronounce the words to. But I did love that this was like fully French film. I've actually seen this movie so many times. I felt like could speak French and like listen to French and understand it. But we rewrote the descriptions and I read Haylie's and I was like, oh, that's like really good. Mine was just silly. Will you read your movie description rewrite for us?
Yes. Marianne, a French painter, faces an ethical dilemma when a challenging job evolves into intimacy. 2 young women learn the meaning of freedom and love and the pain of having it stripped away.
Ooh, wow. That was really good. Maybe this is just because I've seen this movie so many times, but my episode rewrite, or not episode, my movie rewrite is two horny French women, one with a secret and one just back from the convent, pine and long and talk about art and forced marriage amidst a beautiful coastal backdrop.
Well, between the two of us, I feel like they have a pretty good idea of what's going to happen. Right?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to hear, as somebody who has not seen this movie, first thoughts, first impressions. What did you think? And then we'll kind of like go over the plot and go from there.
Well, right off the bat, to anybody listening, I work in the film industry. I went to film school and I now work in Los Angeles on movie sets, commercial sets, TV sets. And what immediately struck me about this was the visuals and the imagery of it, especially the blue versus red that is immediately present in this. And I was like, okay, I feel like there is going to be a character that is representing blue and a character that is representing red, which is obviously like cold, cool, shadowy, and then heat. And also we start out the movie just very in the shadows and in the dark. The opening scene it was very striking to me. The main character is teaching this painting class, and one of her students brought up a painting, and turns out that it's this painting of a portrait of a lady on fire, and she has this very emotional reaction to seeing this painting, but we don't know why. And then it immediately brings her into this flashback of what's happened and why she's painted this, but we don't really know what's going on and why this is so emotional for her. But obviously fire is an important piece of this, and just right off the bat, she arrives at this house on the coast, and when she opens the door, the woman opening the door is holding a flame, and she's led into the house by this flame to this fireplace.
Wow, you were like really watching this with like a critical view. I've seen this movie like a bunch, like I said, and I didn't even notice that. I didn't notice.
Yeah, well, I was like, fire is so important. Okay, fire. And it just right off the bat, I was like, oh my gosh, fire is everyone's leading her in. And yeah, so that was my first impression of this, was that, wow, okay, this is really important. And it did end up being really important, because then we end up seeing is that Marianne, that main character, she's wearing red throughout this whole movie. And she does represent heat, and the other character who she is there to paint is wearing this very deep blue. She's kind of a mysterious character that Marianne has to break down some walls for the majority of the film in order to get to know her. There's a lot of opposition happening, but interestingly enough, at the very end, Marianne ends up wearing a blue shawl over her red dress.
I was gonna say I feel like we're getting ahead of ourselves, but that's okay. So we have Marianne and we have Eloise, and when you were saying that Marianne represents the fire and then like the red, and Eloise the blue, as the movie goes on, I think they switch. I think they completely switch. And at the end, to me, I was feeling like Eloise was the much more warmer one, and Marianne was like the closed off wall one when faced with the reality of their situation.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Okay, great. So let's do the plot a little bit, and then we can just kind of talk about, I'm assuming most of our listeners have seen this film. So plot is, we open up with Marianne. I don't know, I'm going to try and say her name somewhat correctly, but I wrote it down as Marianne. But that's just not as pretty. We have Marianne and Eloise as our two main characters. And you know what, I'm thinking about it too. They are really opposites. One's brunette, one's blonde. Like, they have a lot of, opposition going on.
Yeah, so Eloise comes in from the convent because her mother is trying to marry her off. And her mother hires Marianne to paint a wedding portrait of her. The backstory to this is that Eloise has not sat for anybody because she does not want to be married off. So that's kind of the origin of the conflict of this story. The other piece of this is that her sister, trigger warning here, had just, we assume, committed suicide.
Yes.
So she's kept under very tight lock and key because her mom is scared because of the aftermath of that. So Marianne arrives in order to paint this painting, and she has to do it secretly because Eloise is not going to sit for her. So they're going on these walks. She's trying to memorize her face, going and painting at night afterwards.
On these walks that they go on, I believe I have written down they go on 4 or 5. So Marianne is only going to be there for what seems about a week. We have this other character, Sophie, which is kind of like the house girl, house servant of the movie. She's very sweet. I actually love their little trio that they form because the mom ends up leaving. Marianne and Eloise get a little bit of extra time together because of something that Marianne does. And Sophie is the one to tell Marianne that the sister has died. And it seems like Eloise is going to be marrying the same man. We know nothing about this. Something about this movie is that there's almost no men in the entire movie, which I thought was interesting. What did you think of that? Was that something you liked or?
I did like that because it was solely about the women's relationships to each other.
Okay, yeah. So these walks that they go on, the very first walk, Marianne is like following her. We don't see her, Eloise's face for a while. And Marianne has just been told by Sophie that we're pretty sure that the sister committed suicide. And then Eloise just darts for the cliff. She just runs like full speed at the cliff, and Marianne ends up chasing her. And this is one of the first like dialogue that we get between the two of them, where Eloise turns around and says, I have been dreaming of that my entire life. And Marianne says, dying? And then Eloise just says, no, running. And I thought that was interesting. Lots of assumptions happening.
The portrait painting begins in the hours of the night by the light of the fire, which, so intimate. Drawing a woman by memory in firelight. Are you joking me?
Yeah. How do you not like fall in love with that woman? I don't know how you wouldn't.
Well, I think that probably the next big plot point is when Marianne finishes this painting, but she is having this moral conflict with turning it into the mom because she's now gotten to know Eloise a little bit better, and she's realizing why there is such a resistance to getting married to this man who she doesn't know.
Yeah, they have a lot of conversations, like in depth. I mean, not in depth to the point that we like kind of get to see, but I wrote down that they like trauma bond over the sister's death on one of these walks. They also bond over like the idea of choice. There's a lot of talk of like choice in this movie. And at one point, Eloise says like, oh, you'll never understand me because you have choice in that whether you marry or not. And I don't. And that's why you're never going to be able to understand me. And I think Marianne's a little bit upset about that. And it drives her to want to get to know Eloise better because she's not just this like ornament to society that is going to go be a wife. And, you know, she actually has, like most women of the time and of all time, like has really in-depth thoughts and a heart and a soul. And she finishes this first go of the painting and is not pleased with it.
No, she's looking at it and, well, she shows it to Eloise. And Eloise says, is this how you see me? And she has a point, is that it feels very stiff. It's kind of lifeless, which, I mean, you look at a lot of portraits of the time and yeah, they've been sitting there, and if that's the style, you aren't seeing them in the moments when you would recognize a person as most alive, right? You're seeing them as somebody who's been sitting there for hours and hours and hours. And Eloise, I think, feels very hurt that this person who she feels close to sees her like that.
I agree. She seems like offended at like, this is what you came up with. And they have a little back and forth that was quite chippy. Is that French? Chippy?
English, maybe?
Okay, fine. Yeah, it's not it's not cool enough to be French. Where they're looking at this painting and Eloise is obviously offended, and Marianne says, and Eloise is giving all of her critical feedback, just like you were talking about. And Marianne says, "Oh, I didn't know you were an art critic." And Eloise fires back, "Well, I didn't know you were a painter." And to me, I'm like, ooh, like you really start to see Eloise's wit and like sharpness. And I find that very attractive. So I'm assuming Marianne did. I think most people do. And yeah, it's just they're back and forths in the beginning here to me. I mean, we're like 40 minutes into this movie at this point. It's a very long movie. Are quick and stagnant. They're not like long drawn out interactions, I would say. Before Marianne shows the painting to the mom and after she shows it to Eloise, she takes like a wet cloth and like smears the face off of the painting that she just spent a week drawing and painting from memory.
Yeah, ruins it. So the mom comes in, deems her incompetent, tries to send her away. At which point, Eloise does something that is very self-sacrificing in order to keep Marianne close to her. Mm-hmm. And she says, "I will sit for her. Don't send her away." That was a moment where I was starting to see, like, she is falling in love with this woman.
Yeah.
Because even though she just was betrayed by her, she is going to do this thing that ultimately will result in her being sent to this fate that she has been doing everything in her power to avoid, just to get an extra week with this person.
Yeah, I know. I thought the same thing the first time I watched this movie, and she's like, "No, I'll sit for her." I was like, oh, it's about to go down. Like, I was like, oh, this is the changing point of the movie. So the mom leaves. She says, "I'll be back in 5 days." But it's just Eloise, Marianne, and Sophie in this big house. My favorite part of this movie is the orchestra and the theme of music that kind of ties through. So Eloise says that she loves music, but she only has ever heard organ music, right? From her time in the convent. And to me, I was like, oh my God, like that's always so like, an organ is like sad and depressing sounds to me. I'm sure that there are upbeat organ sounds, but it just sounds, like that, like it just sounds depressing. And Marianne's like, "You've never heard like an orchestra?" And honestly, I literally credit this movie with my like fascination and love of orchestra things now. Not this past birthday, but the birthday before, my ex-girlfriend actually took me to an orchestra, which was like my favorite experience of like my life. Oh my gosh. And so Marianne plays this orchestra like piece. I think it's one of Vivaldi's symphonies. And she plays it on this like really, I don't know if it's a piano. I don't think it's a piano. It's some other little form of a piano. And Eloise is already like infatuated. And I definitely think she was like really like in love with Marianne from that point.
Yeah. And it was also really beautiful the way that Marianne told a story to Eloise while she was playing her this song. And yeah, just the way that Eloise looked at her.
Oh, yeah. And that was the thing. It switched from Marianne constantly looking at Eloise to like, this is where Eloise started to really look at Marianne.
Yeah.
And Eloise is quite like striking figure. Like her features are very striking. To have her stare is like, I don't know. It just very intense.
Especially because her eyes are this very shocking bright blue. Also, throughout the whole first part of the movie, they keep talking about how Marianne can't get her to smile. And all of a sudden here, Eloise is smiling while Marianne is playing her the song and telling her what's happening during it.
But it's not like a huge, intense smile, though. Like, it's very small. And as the movie goes on, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger as the movie gets on until it's like an actual, like, true smile. actually while Marianne is painting her, and she can't stop smiling.
Yeah.
And Marianne's like, could you be serious? She's like, no. So yeah, they bond over that. And then I think one of the really big bonding key points here in this movie has to do with Sophie.
Yes, the sisterhood that the three of those people have together is just, my gosh. The image, the silhouette of them walking together.
Oh my gosh.
Was so beautiful.
It's one of the most beautiful frames in a movie I have seen. I like, yeah, it's gorgeous. Let's talk about where they're going and what Sophie's choice.
Sophie's choice.
Please tell me you know that reference.
Yeah.
Okay, phew.
So, yeah, we're back on the theme of choice here, and Marianne was having period pain. Again, we're in front of the fireplace, and Sophie is heating up a little heat pack for her. And she makes a comment to Marianne about how she usually has one of these ready, but she doesn't because she hasn't had her monthlies for the last 3 months. And Marianne just kind of turns around and is like,
excuse me?
Is this the first time this has happened to you? And Sophie's like, yes. And so, and also at this point, we find out that this has happened to Marianne before.
Right. And Marianne asks Sophie, do you want a child? And Sophie says no. Because the thing that also this movie doesn't touch on like a lot is like the class differences. Like you have Sophie, who's a servant, so like the lowest class, and then I would argue that Marianne is like more middle class, and then obviously Eloise is much more high class. But in their interactions and their like you were saying, their sisterhood, like I feel like all of those class distinctions like melted away, especially because they were by themselves.
Yeah, the way that they interact with each other is just really beautiful and intimate. Another thing that this film really leaves open to interpretation and we never know is how these women got pregnant. There's no men in this. They never tell us. And Sophie looks really young.
She does.
And we never see a man. We never see her leave the house, except for when she's with Marianne and Eloise. And so we don't know if she, is in a relationship, or we don't know if there was something more troubling going on. So that's kind of another aspect of this that really got my wheels spinning.
So Sophie is pregnant. The girls all team up to try and induce an abortion. And the way they do it, it's like very interesting to see, like, I mean, women have always had abortions. The fight that we get into nowadays is like, well, are they going to be safe or not? Because if you outlaw them, then they're not going to stop happening. They're just going to become unsafe. But it's interesting to see even like, 200 plus years ago, that we already had all of these, like, and I say we, and I mean women, like already have all of these old wives' tale type of ways of dealing with unwanted pregnancies. So I found it fascinating. I think they try 3 different ways. One is just exhaustion. So they take Sophie to the beach and they have her basically run suicides, which if you didn't grow up doing sports is just like back, forth, back, forth, back, forth, back, forth, back, forth, like until she literally like collapses. And then the next way would be obviously like looking for these like specific herbs. And it seems like Sophie's the one that knows most about this, which makes sense because I feel like women in lower socioeconomic spaces have to be more resourceful in terms of like healthcare and, really anything. The third way is they look like they're like having her hang from the ceiling.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
I had never seen that before.
Yeah. So she was hanging from the ceiling. There was they were just showing her feet, which was a little alarming at first when, it just pans over from the other two to these feet hanging and it shows no head and you're like, ah.
It doesn't look good. I'm like, why are they just standing there?
Yeah, and then, they have the chair there. She just goes down on the chair and takes a sip of the tea, and you're like, oh, okay, everything's fine.
Yes.
But yeah, so she does get very ill from drinking this tea from these herbs that they collected. And then they have this waiting period. And one of my favorite moments in this film was Eloise and Sophie falling asleep in the bed together after this. Mm-hmm. And that was just this, I think, really special, close moment of these women will take care of each other. And that really showed this sisterhood and how close they really were. Mm-hmm. And I think there's very few things that are as intimate as sleeping with somebody, like truly just sleeping and
sharing a bed together. Yeah.
Yeah. That's very vulnerable, especially because one of them is sick. Right. Yeah. So during this time, Marianne goes and gets her little pad and she sits there and she's drawing Eloise, and Eloise wakes up and sees her, catches her doing it, and then just kind of smiles and lets her keep drawing her, which was a very cute instance there.
Yeah, she's like a more intimate way of posing for her.
Yeah.
I thought that was really sweet.
Yeah, it's like when you catch someone taking a photo of you and you're like, oh, that's embarrassing. Like, okay.
Because you're like being perceived, but like you're okay being perceived from this person.
Yeah.
So can we talk about like the waiting period before that beautiful walking silhouetted portrait scene off to where they're going? There's a couple things. One thing that I wanted to talk about was what you were talking about with these three women taking care of each other and all of that. There was a little like lunch scene and it's completely quiet. No one's talking. And it's like a still shot from like just the camera's not moving. Like it's just looking at all three women. And Sophie's doing a little needlepoint and Marianne is pouring wine for everyone. And Eloise is like handling the food and like getting that set up. And I was watching that scene and I was just like, if only life could just be just like this. Yeah. Like, everyone doing their little task, one of them doing a task for enjoyment. The other two are, taking care and like right in the hearth of the home with the fire again. And it was just so like calm before the storm that's going to come. What I did like is these like, little stormy things that happen. They weren't small, but they weren't the main focus of the movie, which I really appreciated. But this is when we get to a really, like, to me, this is what tied all of the movie together, was they were reading the story of Orpheus. Mm-hmm. And I believe it's pronounced Eurydice?
Eurydice?
Oh, that was really wrong on my end.
I only know because of the song. There's a song about it that's on repeat for me.
Oh, send it to me. I want to hear it. And I really want to talk about this part because it at the end, Marianne has painted this main scene in this story. So the story basically is that Orpheus's wife, what's her name? Eurydice has died, and Orpheus is heartbroken, and he goes to the underworld to get her back, and he makes this impassioned plea for her that the gods can't even say no to. And I'm like, God, I need someone to do that for me. Okay. The gods say, okay, you can take her, but don't look back at her before you guys get up to earth and back outside, or else it's going to be void and she's going to stay here with us in the underworld, dead. And he ends up looking back, and she falls back into the underworld. And what's so interesting to me is the three different women's perspective on this. Sophie had the reaction that I had at the beginning, where I was like, why did he do that? All you had to do was that's the Capricorn in me. All you had to do was this one thing, just follow the rules and you get everything you want. What I loved about this was Eloise's take was, but he was so in love with her, he couldn't control himself. He had to look back, right?
Yeah.
And then Marianne Marianne has a very went to film school, went to type of take, because she's like,
She's an artiste.
yeah, she's the artiste in there, and she's like, oh no, he made the poet's choice versus the lover's choice and chose her memory.
Yeah.
And then who is it that's then there's one more suggestion thrown out there, which is that, I don't know how to say it, Eurydice called him and said, look back. And I thought that was very interesting of a take. What did you think of this scene?
Well, as soon as they started reading, I was like, this is a metaphor.
Everything in this movie is a metaphor.
Yeah. I mean, I can empathize with all three of these takes for sure.
Yeah. Okay, maybe we just like let this one hang, because I feel like Eloise and Marianne have this exact encounter much later in the movie.
Yes,
and
they
it's gorgeous, and it's interesting to see whose take was correct for them. Because that was really telling, in my opinion. So now we have our favorite little silhouetted scene, and they're walking across this beautiful hill, like right after dusk in like the blue period of the, you have golden hour, and then you have the blue hour right after. It looks like it's that timing. Where are they going? Because it's kind of cool.
Yeah, so I don't know if we can call her a doctor or not. She's some sort of doctor.
I think she's a midwife. But they're going to meet the midwife for the first time, which they meet at this really cool spot. I don't know what the spot's called, but
it's like a bonfire meeting of women.
Yeah, it's very, honestly, it gives like coven vibes. Like it really gave like witchy vibes, which it isn't, but I could see why men would get scared and be like, burn them at the stake.
Especially with the music at the beginning and the way that they start walking in a circle. I was like, oh, there's something scary happening.
It was creepy at first, and then the more
it evolved into something so beautiful.
But we see them walk up to this, like, it's not a group of women. It really is like a bonfire, like you would walk up to like on the beach here, And Sophie goes and talks to this older woman who we can assume is a midwife. She does put her hands like on Sophie's stomach, which seems she's kind of like trying to feel how far along she is, maybe, which she's not showing. She's probably, if she's missed her period 3 times, 10 weeks along. But then there's a lot more that happens. Why don't you tell us what your favorite parts of the scene is and kind of an overview of the scene?
Well, there's tension. There's a lot of tension between Eloise and Marianne at the bonfire.
Mm-hmm. Not bad tension. Not like they're contentious with each other, but just like the looks are getting crazy at this juncture of the story. I think they're both like fully in love with each other at this point.
We're cutting between shots of Marianne and Eloise. And they're standing on opposite sides of the bonfire. And the shot of Marianne is clean. Yeah. It's just of her. There's nothing obstructing the view of her. And then the shot of Eloise, which would be Marianne's view of Eloise, there's all of these embers flying in front of her. There's heat distortion. We just keep cutting back and forth, and they're not breaking the stare. And you can only see it's a shot from, it's like a medium shot. You can see waist up maybe.
Well, there's all this music and singing in the background.
Yeah.
And I think that's really, like, I want you to continue with that train of thought, but I do want to mention the music for multiple reasons. One is we know that Eloise hasn't heard a lot of music and that she loves music. And so this is very like enchanting, very like rapturous for her. And it just like, I think this music drives the scene. It really like takes you into like a very like melodic, almost like hypnotic state where when these scenes are cutting back and forth to Marianne and Eloise, you're like waiting for the next cut to come so you can see like what's happening. I think like Eloise is almost crying. You can like see the tears in her eyes, but she is not. The one thing this actress can do that plays Eloise is not blink. The way she can hold a stare is incredible. So, okay, so we have this this witchy melodic music in the background of these like cut shots between them, and they're just staring, and yeah, what happens?
Yeah, so then Eloise takes a step towards the edge of the woods, and we can now see her whole body because the bonfire is no longer blocking her, and the edge of her dress is on fire, and she doesn't know it yet. And the fire just starts to move up her skirt, and this is the image of the portrait that Marianne had painted that gave her such an emotional reaction in the opening scene. And we now know exactly, there's some sort of noise.
It's my garbage disposal. Well, this is our first time recording remotely, everyone. So there is some troubleshooting happening here. Okay, it's done.
Okay. And we know how impactful this moment was to Marianne and how she's going to remember this for the rest of her life, and that she had hidden this painting away, right? So the fire moves up Eloise's skirt, and people come and rush to put it out, and she collapses onto the ground. End scene.
End scene. Yep. Just that's it. That's all we see. It's funny too because Eloise does look down at the fire, and she doesn't care. Like, she really doesn't do anything because she's so struck with Marianne. Like, she's like, I don't care that I'm literally on fire. I want to look at you. And then it just cuts to the next walk that they're on. And it's in the cliffside. And, like, this tension has not been broken. Even with, like, the cut to the next scene. And the next scene's tension is so palpable. My, like, breathing was, like, heavy because I was like, what is going to happen? And we get to kind of, I wouldn't call it, like, a climax of the film. But they have their face coverings on because it's windy, so it's like blocking their mouths, and they're just looking at each other. And all of these shots are like super, super tight shots of their faces. And the moving camera shot of the rocks, and it like, now the girls aren't together. Eloise has like walked ahead, and she's like in this like alcove of these rock cliffs, and the camera like pans around and you just see her. And Marianne walks up to her, and now they're like this close to each other. One of the things in this movie that I really appreciated was like all of the consent, because they actually kiss in this scene and they both take down their own like face covering. I loved that part because I felt like it was very clear that they both had the idea and the desire to like kiss each other. And to like that action to me was like really important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they had almost kissed before, and Marianne had gotten scared and moved away.
Right.
Walked away from it.
Yeah, and in this instance, all they do is move closer to each other. Yeah. And they kiss, and then Eloise runs away, much like Alex from The Senator's Wife. Gets real scared, runs away, and Marianne is just kind of like, what the heck just happened here? Mm-hmm. And then they go back to the house, and Sophie tells Marianne that Eloise is not coming for lunch or for dinner. She's going to be in her room.
Which, the anxiety I would have if I kissed the girl that I had such a big crush on, and then she just runs away from me and then misses dinner. I'd be like, oh man, she hated. I was a bad kisser.
Yep, you're like, oh shit. Well, that's great for my self-esteem.
My mixer box just gave me flashing lights because I laughed too loud.
That's really funny. But Marianne goes to her room after dinner, and who is there but Eloise? And this is my favorite dialogue exchange. My Pisces moon cannot handle beautiful words. It makes me want to cry. And Marianne walks up to Eloise and just puts her head on her shoulder and says, I thought you were afraid. And she was like, I am. I'm scared. And then they're like touching each other, like very softly, very intimately. And Eloise says my favorite line of the whole movie. She says, "Do all lovers feel like they're inventing something?" Oh my God. I was just like, that's like the most beautiful. Like, if someone said that to me, I would be a puddle. I would just be like, I can't go on. I think somebody mentioned something about a dream, and Marianne says to Eloise, like, you dreamt of me? And she said, no, I thought of you. And it's like, that's like the conscious decision to think of someone versus like the unconscious dreaming state. It's so beautiful because it's like, no, I purposely chose you and I purposely chose to think of you.
It also feels like there's a differential there where she's saying there was no idealization of you. She's not putting her on a pedestal.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't think of that. That's really good. Good job, film school. I love that.
Thanks.
But one of my qualms with this movie is this is a French movie and we don't get the sex scenes. I was like, what happened? So they like are kissing and that's it. That's the end of the scene. That's all we get. And I was like, dang it. I wanted to see a little something. Like, whatever. And then they fall asleep. They wake up in the next morning, and Sophie knocks on the door and basically like lets them know, like, hey, I have the meeting with my midwife.
Mm-hmm. So they go to the midwife's house. This scene felt very powerful to watch. Mm-hmm. Sophie's laying on the bed. This is a very difficult thing to go through for somebody. And the care that everyone involved took with her was really intentional and really beautiful. Yeah. The midwife was very gentle and very kind, and the whole thing felt very familial.
But there is a baby on this bed during this unmedicated like abortion. I kind of thought it was, at first I was like, like the first couple times I watched the movie, I was like taken aback. I was like, that's a little much. But then the more I thought about it, I was like, it's actually like, it's the idea of choice. It's not that Sophie doesn't like babies or like kids. It's just like, I don't want one, and I thought that was interesting. And the baby like almost comforts Sophie in a way. And like, it lets Sophie like go to a different headspace than what she's experiencing in her body.
Yeah, so I think that there was a really big portion of grief that we see in this, because this is Sophie's choice to have this abortion because she doesn't want a child. Yet we do see she is going through grief as she's being comforted by this baby that, like, she's having a baby taken out of her right now. And meanwhile, this other baby is holding her hand and touching her stomach as she's having an abortion, which is also, it's really painful. You can see it on her face that she is in so much pain. And this other like tiny human being is giving her comfort. And also her sisterhood is standing there close to her in support. And as the procedure finishes, she makes eye contact with this baby, and you see her have this moment of heartbreak and grief. And because even when that is your choice, it is still a really hard choice to make, and it's still something that you have to grieve for yourself. And
or it can be for some women, it can be a very difficult choice.
When they get back home, especially Eloise has recognized that. She was really paying attention watching this, and she recognized that moment, and she brought the mattress in front of the fireplace, and she positioned Sophie like she's giving birth. And like her Eloise was the midwife and asked Marianne to paint them
Yeah.
so that Sophie would have this.
What do you think the reason was for that? What do you think was like in Eloise's mind? Because like I have my theory, but I want to hear what you thought of that.
I think that it was an alternative way to give Sophie this other ending. I think that it was her seeing this moment of heartbreak in Sophie's eyes and her trying to provide her solace. And, there's something really powerful about art and imagery, and especially if you can see yourself in this art. And this is literally art of Sophie and kind of rewriting a story for her where she can picture herself having this other ending without her actually having to have that, where she still gets to have her choice. And we don't know why Sophie had this abortion. We don't know
Right.
why she didn't want a child. Maybe she just doesn't want one. Maybe because of her socioeconomic status, she felt like she couldn't support one. Like, we don't know what the reasoning was there. And
Yeah.
maybe Eloise maybe she knows why. And, that could have informed her decision there as well, especially if it was a socioeconomic reason. Like, that could have really influenced her decision to do that.
Yeah, I thought my take on that scene where she's having her draw the abortion was it was like a way to heal and process for all three women. Like Marianne's way of dealing is painting, right? And for Eloise and Sophie, it was like we get to kind of like reenact this, but with more control. And also like it's a way to like sit with the feelings and like process. So yeah, that was definitely a bonding scene for all three of them. Okay, so to kind of move things along, we have Marianne finishing the painting of Eloise. And they go through multiple times of like Marianne painting and Eloise sitting. And it's cute. They're like really in love at this point and they like know it. So
yeah, it's like dirty talk while they're doing this.
Yes, it's so funny. That's what I was saying at the beginning, where it's like it feels like they're talking about something inanimate, and they're like literally talking about sex. Like, I want you, and I thought that was funny. I thought it was great writing. I enjoyed it, and then I thought it was really cool that Marianne let Eloise like finish the painting, like let her do like the last stroke, but it also like leads to like this really heartbreaking conversation that they have where like Eloise has like come to terms with the fact that she's going to have to marry this man at the end of this. And Marianne, because she's not the one in that position, I think she has an easier time. And this is where I was talking about where I feel like they switched, where I feel like Eloise became the warm, feel it all type girl. Like where she was crying, she was upset, and Marianne is like very stoic and closed off. I mean, at one point Eloise is like, "Are you gonna ask me to resist?" And I don't know if Eloise was looking for yes, or if Eloise like I don't know what she was looking for in asking that question, but Marianne says no, like I don't want you to resist it, and then she just turns and walks away. And I was just like, oh no, like it's the end. And shows it to the mom. And the mom is like, love it. And then we get our only guy that comes in and takes the painting. And yeah, what did you think of the finishing up of the painting?
I just was feeling really heartbroken through it because this whole part, I mean, they are actively saying goodbye and they know it. And it's not by their own choice. And it just feels, I mean, any lesbian knows the pain of lesbian heartbreak. And here we are watching it unfold on screen. And there's just a certain kind of pain to one where you're still in love and you don't really have a choice about it.
Yeah.
And that's what's happening to both of them in this moment.
Yeah. Yeah. To
Yeah.
walk away when you're still in love has to be one of the hardest things to do.
Yeah.
And in a movie that is so much about choice, this is the choice that they don't have. Yeah, it's truly heartbreaking. Marianne goes to leave, and this is the part of the book I'm still in book club mode. Marianne gives a nice hug to the mom, gives the fastest hug I've ever seen in history to Eloise, walks out, walks down the stairs. She's at the door, very much like Orpheus leaving. And again, their positions like flip-flopped because Eloise walks out and she says, turn around. And without a second of hesitation, Marianne turns around. And to me, I was like, that's such beautiful and incredible storytelling, because Eloise is the one that said, well, Orpheus couldn't control himself. He loved her so much. He was so enamored with her. He had to look at her. And here we have Marianne fulfilling that story. Yeah. Marianne is like, I could not resist turning around. And then the camera is on Eloise, and then you hear the door shut and like go to black.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God. And honestly, it took me like literally 5 times watching this movie to like fully realize this scene. Oh, it's heartbreaking. I cry every time.
Yeah, I'm like feeling my eyes kind of well up thinking about it.
Oh my God. Okay, so something we forgot to talk about was Marianne and Eloise's last night together, because we didn't talk about the drawing that Marianne does for Eloise. Mm. But Marianne is drawing like what looks like kind of like one of those like pendant things, and it's like kind of a redoing of the portrait so that she has something to hold on to and remember about Eloise. And Eloise is like, but I don't have anything of you.
Yeah, it's like an old-timey version of a school wallet picture.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Marianne ends up drawing like basically a self-portrait, which the mirror placement was amazing. Like it was basically Eloise on her side and then this like circular mirror placed right over like her vagina. And it was like a really pretty shot, I thought. And Marianne draws herself on page 28 of Eloise's book.
Yeah, which the page 28 is very important. Remember that, people.
Yeah, everyone remember that. If you haven't seen the movie, remember it, because we're going to tell you why. Okay, so after the painting's delivered, which we talked about already, we flash forward, and Marianne is at an art gallery. So, and there's kind of like a voiceover from Marianne saying that she saw Eloise one time after she left. So supposedly what we think has happened, which I believe has happened, is Eloise has gone to Milan, married this man, and Marianne is back doing her art in presumably Paris.
Yeah. Yeah, so Marianne is standing in front of this wall of art, and we know that her father owns a business selling his art, right? So they're at this art show, and this man approaches her and he asks her, are you standing guard? And she's like, well, no, I'm looking at reactions. And he then comments on this painting, and he says, well, your father did a really wonderful job on this painting of Eurydice and Orpheus. And she goes, well, actually, that's my painting. I just put it under his name to get it in the art show. And he makes a comment about how it's different from how it's normally told because they're facing each other.
Right.
What Marianne has done is she has taken this scene and she's basically recreated her last moment with Eloise. And what's also really interesting about this is that Eurydice is wearing this white dress that is the wedding dress that she has repeatedly had visions of Eloise in. She kept having these almost hallucinations of like dreamlike, very striking, unsettling hallucinations of Eloise in this wedding dress throughout the second half of the film. And then she actually sees Eloise in it when her mother comes back and has her try it on. So when she's saying goodbye. Yeah. That's what she's painted Eurydice in this image. And she turns around after this and goes and walks to the other side of the gallery, and she sees that somebody has painted a portrait of Eloise, and she has not the traditional very stoic look on her face. She has a very knowing look on her face, like she is speaking directly to Marianne with her eyes.
Yeah.
There is a child with her who's clearly Eloise's, which that was really heartbreaking to me because it's like, okay, it's clearly been years that they've been separated.
Yeah, like
this child is probably like 6.
That's what I was gonna say, 6, yeah.
Just knowing Marianne is seeing that, like, wow, she really has this whole other life, and it's been such a long time. But then it pans down and you see that Eloise is holding the book, and she's holding it open so you can see just a crack that it is open to page 28.
Oh my god.
And no one would know except for Marianne what that means.
That is like, I don't even have words. Like, I'm literally like about to cry. Because, that is just like, I still remember you. I still love you. I still think of you often. Like, often enough that I'm going to put it in my portrait, which they probably only had done every so often, you know?
Yeah, and just to even, she doesn't know that Marianne would ever see this. This is like on the off chance that, well, maybe this ends up in a gallery that Marianne someday is in.
Right.
She might see it and know that I'm thinking of her.
Yeah, and now we're thinking that this is the time that Marianne saw Eloise one last time, but it turns out it's not. She actually saw her in person, and I think this does go more with the continue on the theme of like Orpheus's story, because they're at a symphony and she sees Eloise like all the way across the theater in like the balcony seats, which I think Marianne's in the balcony too, because it's very like eye level. And like the Vivaldi symphony starts playing, and you can just see that like on Eloise's face is just, she is like overtaken with emotion. Like she is like tearing up. You can see her chest like heaving. And Marianne says that she didn't approach her. She didn't go see her. And again, that's like the poet's choice of like choosing the memory instead of like fulfilling, you know, like whatever like desire or love you have in person, which I don't know. I think I would have said something. I think I would have been like, hey.
I think I would have been unable to stay away.
Right. Because it's very much a stark contrast of like turning around immediately and then not approaching at all. And I was just like, wow, couldn't be me. Could not be me.
Yeah. And I just, watching the emotion that she has where this is the exact song that Marianne had played her on the piano and had told her the story, and just knowing that this is her reliving the memory of Marianne.
I know.
And that this is one of the very few connections that she would have left to her, and that she specifically sought this out and went there alone, and that she's having such a visceral reaction all of these years later.
Yeah.
And not only is there the chest heaving and the emotion on her face and the crying, but towards the end, she starts to smile and laugh. Like she's so, you know, she's heartbroken, but this is also such a happy, joyful memory for her that she's holding on to. And it was such a powerful way to end this film.
I agree. It really felt like such a perfect ending. But I feel like there could have been like multiple perfect endings. Like, could have ended it at the painting, could have ended it at Marianne leaving. But like this, I felt like was like such a nod to the story and like the characters in it to like give, like, Marianne got her like kind of closure with that painting. And then like Eloise kind of got her closure with like the symphony.
Yeah.
And I was like,
It's also incredible the amount of time that they held uncut on Eloise
uh-huh.
and just the range of emotion that she went through. They were able to hold on her and have it be just absolutely all encompassing and riveting. Like I couldn't look away. And they
Yeah.
had to have held for, I don't even know how long it was, but it was such a
Yeah.
long hold. And I feel like any other just uncut of just sitting on somebody's face with no dialogue, nothing, no movement, it's so hard to keep a viewer's attention. And it was perfectly done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I loved it. Okay, what rating do you give this movie? Let's say like out of stars, 5 stars. What do you?
5.
5 stars. I agree. It's a 5-star for me. Although I feel like I'm like so silly because anything with like lesbians in it, I'm like 5 stars. But maybe we'll cover some other ones that you don't like. So you could be the critical one, and I'll be the Paula Abdul. Loved it. Okay, great. Should we try and figure out their star signs?
Yeah, I was sitting there eating breakfast trying to think because I knew you were going to ask this, and I was like, I'm stumped.
Are you? Okay, so
I truly don't. I'm not good at this.
It's okay. You're gonna have to get good at it. I'm gonna give you a book. Eloise to me feels earthy and watery. And then
okay, I got the earth part.
Yeah, and it could be that her dress is green, which we didn't even go into like the symbolism of like green dresses, which I was going to, but that was such a tangent. Yeah, and then Marianne gives me like, I don't know, she gives me like earth and air vibes. So even though this is like Portrait of a Lady on Fire, I don't think there were any fire signs in this at all. I mean, maybe Marianne. She's kind of flighty a little bit. Like she's like okay with like leaving. But okay, so let's see. Eloise, I want to say maybe Taurus, which is like a fixed earth sign. So like stubborn, but also like ruled by Venus, which loves like love and beauty and just like the beautiful things in life. And that's where I feel like maybe she has some water placements in there because like the emotion that she ends up showing once Marianne has like peeled back some of those like maybe earth walls of hers is like once she's comfortable with someone, like her emotion like is flowing out of her. And so to me, I was just like, that gives like water. Maybe she has like a water dominant chart with like some earth signs thrown in there to kind of put those guards up. That's kind of my vibe. And then for Marianne, I feel like anytime I'm attracted to any person in a movie, I'm like, oh, they're a Libra. Yeah, she is quiet though, so that gives me like more like Aquarius vibes. And Aquariuses are like kind of weirdos in that like they kind of balk at like tradition and like cultural norms and things like that. And then like Marianne being someone who's like a woman and gonna take over her family's business, her dad's business, and is a painter, which women going into the arts wasn't as normalized. Like she even talks about how she's not even allowed to paint the male form, which I found very interesting. So I'm going to go Aquarius for Marianne, and I'm going to go Taurus for Eloise. And then little Sophie, she gives me a little baby Pisces energy. Like, who's a little baby? She could be a Sagittarius, though. I can make Sophie.
You think?
Because, like, if it was a consensual relationship that resulted in this pregnancy, like, and she's so young, that gives like fiery, like, like going with whims and being led by emotion and like desire, So I could see that for Sophie. But also like the drive to like know what you want and like go after it. And I'm talking about like an abortion here, being like, no, this is what I have to do. And then have the like guts to do it. That gives like fire sign energy. But I don't know. What do you think? You didn't like that.
I just think that she's so, like you said, she's so just quiet and kind of demure and soft and tender. And she doesn't give me the super adventurous, wild, like, I must be free sort of vibes that a Sagittarius does, I guess.
No, that makes sense. But we also only really got to see her like during employment. So like
That's true.
you do have to kind of like taper down a little bit. But it does seem like she lives there. She does like her needlepoint. She's just such a baby.
Yeah. Although we do see her when the mom leaves and she gets to just like be in this kind of equal playing field with the other two girls, and she still seems that way to me.
Yeah. Okay. I like it.
I don't know.
Look at you. You have thoughts and feelings on this. This is good. You're learning. Okay, so that was Portrait of a Lady on Fire. And I feel like, what movie should we cover next? I sent you like a whole list. Or we could start our L word walkthrough.
I saw a TikTok of Shane.
Yeah.
In an outfit, and someone said to Shane, like, I can't be seen in public with you because you look like a dyke. And then Shane was like, what are you talking about? And looks down, and she's wearing like a wife beater and like skinny jeans or something like that. I don't remember exactly, but I'm sure I'm absolutely butchering this scene. And everybody.
No, I know exactly what scene you're talking about.
Yeah, but anyway,
that's one of her friends. That's Dana that says that to her.
Yeah, I have seen. When I was, I don't know, 19 or 20, I saw one episode because my girlfriend at the time, who is much older than me, was like, Haylie, why have you not seen the L Word? Same sort of reaction that you had to hearing that. So,
and I am much older than you.
And I don't remember anything that happened. So, I mean, that was several years ago.
Okay. No, I think it'll be good. And we can go through it like, one a week. So it won't be, we're not going to make you binge watch multiple seasons of it at a time. That'd be too much. And if any of our listeners have any recommendations they want, I'm going to link in the show notes where you can reach out to us. We have an email, we have an Instagram, we have a TikTok. Those handles are Lesbian Book Club Pod. But again, I'll link it in the show notes before. And thanks for joining us, guys. Can't wait to cover more books and movies. Our next book, Haylie, we're going to do the second part of the Senator's Wife trilogy.
Yay!
I'm so excited. So be on the lookout for that. And yeah, I think that's it. Bye.